brother ruined our family business with fraud. Now my parents expect me to save their golden child. So about 2 months ago, my parents decided to ask their darling older son to run the business that I had been helping them build for the past couple of years. That was the point at which I decided that I was going to step away from the family business and cut all ties with my family because it was just crazy since my brother was not a good guy. I don't mean a bad person in the sense that he was mean to me at some point, I mean that he's a straight up criminal. And it's not like my parents didn't know this, they knew, they just didn't care. Because criminal or not, that's their firstborn son and they are going to baby him forever. I'm 26, male, and my brother is 30. Right from when we were kids, he had been quite unscrupulous, and lying, cheating, and stealing were normal for him. He used to get caught quite often, so it wasn't even like he was good at it, but our parents never did anything real about it. They scolded him a little and grounded him for a few days, but they would always make things right with him, and eventually, he learned that he could get away with it if he was charming enough with our parents. It didn't work with me, though. I could see right through him, and I didn't like him. So from the beginning itself, we have had a quite rough sibling rivalry because I used to think he was a straight up bad person and never bothered to try and get along with him, and my parents thought that I was stuck up, so they would insist that we spend time together and both of us would hate it. Eventually, both of us left home for our respective careers and we would only meet on the holidays. Then, a couple of months after I had graduated from high school, I heard from my parents that my brother had been fired from the company that he had been working in on charges of fraud and was being investigated. After the childhood that I had spent with him, I was not surprised at all because even in his teenage years, he had become quite a teenage delinquent, and this had been coming for a really long time. For a couple of months, he was on the run, but eventually, I guess he was able to get those charges squashed with the help of my parents or something, and all was well again. This was almost 3 or 4 years back, and as far as I remember, after my parents bailed him out by paying his company off with a ton of money, they decided to cut ties with him to teach him a lesson. I remember thinking that this was probably the first time that my parents had done the right thing, and I was quite happy about it. Around the same time, my dad asked me to start working under him and help him out with the family business. I had just graduated. I was looking for jobs anyway, so I thought there was nothing better than working on your own family's business, and I agreed. Since then, I was the one who had been working really hard with my parents to run the business and learn the ropes so I could eventually take over. Nobody had said anything about it because my dad was still quite far away from the age of retirement and he had no intention of giving up the reins of his business so soon, but in my head, I knew that after my dad retired, this would all be mine. I was pretty sure of it since my brother was not in the picture back then. However, he reached out to my parents about 6 months ago and said that he really wanted to apologize to them for everything and he needed a second chance from them to prove that he was not the person that he used to be. He said that he had gone straight and had been working legitimately for the past couple of years. My brother tried really hard to sell the fact that he was now a sincere employee at a company with a good reputation, but he was sick of staying outside of the city and wanted to come back home. But if my parents didn't want that, he would stay away from our family. Personally, I thought they should have just told him to stay away because he was the worst, but my parents melted and decided to forgive him and bring him back. I was obviously against the idea, and I told my parents that this would backfire, but they told me that everybody deserves a second chance, and that shut me up because I couldn't say anything to that. And anyway, not getting along with my parents was not an option for me because our family business was doing pretty well and I didn't want to stir trouble for ourselves by fighting within the family. Besides, as long as he had nothing to do with the business, I was happy because I lived away from home so I wouldn't have to see him or interact with him often anyway. So he came back and my parents were very happy, and from the looks of it, so was he. There was a little family reunion and they hosted a party and stuff, and he seemed to be a changed man at first, but even then, I simply couldn't bring myself to trust him. I should have trusted my gut feeling and told my parents about it, but since things were going well for them, I didn't want to be the bad guy. So a couple of months passed and my brother and I had nothing to do with each other, but I knew that he had been living with our parents ever since he had moved back here, which I thought was slightly fishy since I knew that he had been working for the past 3 or 4 years, so he should have had some money of his own. He claimed that the only reason he had come back and had been living with his parents was because he had missed them terribly and wanted to make up for the last time, but I didn't buy it. I thought that there was something off about this entire thing, and I was right. Anyway, my parents thought I was being too skeptical and suspicious, and told me to lay off of him, so I did. But 2 months back, when my dad decided to bring him to work and start teaching him things, I couldn't help but confront him about it. And that was when my dad chose to tell me that he was training my brother to take over the business since my father was planning on retiring soon, and once the training was complete, he would test my brother for a couple of months and then start the paperwork. I was shocked because all this while, I had been working really hard and I had assumed that if my dad ever retired anytime soon, he would be leaving the business to me. That would be the fair thing to do, But that day, he told me that since my brother was older, he was the first in line to inherit the business. Never mind the fact that he had never worked a day on the family business like I had, neither had he taken any interest when my parents had been talking to him about training him after he had graduated. I got into a heated fight with my dad that day, and after speaking to my mom, I realized that even she was on his side. I tried to tell them how stupid it was of them to be leaving the business to a guy who had been accused of fraud previously, and they themselves had to bail him out, but they told me that it didn't matter because it was their son and everyone can make mistakes, so they were ready to forgive him. They tried to appease me by telling me that both of us could be in charge as business partners, but that has never worked with me and my brother. So I made it very clear that if he was part of the business at all, I would be stepping away because I did not want anything to do with him. It was bad enough that I had to tolerate the fact that he was a part of my family and was related to me by blood, but having him be a part of my place of work was where I drew the line. We fought and argued about it for a really long time, and eventually, my parents decided to side with him. I was left feeling like a complete idiot for working so hard on the family business for the past couple of years, but I decided to cut my losses and just leave my family so I could focus on other things. It has been 2 months since then, and I have been trying to look for a job, but I'm not putting myself under any pressure because I have enough money to last for quite some time. I had been making a decent income working in the family business, but now, I was just worried about the future, and I was mostly just trying to process and cope with the fact that my parents had absolutely no brain cells to function and that my brother was going to get everything that I had worked hard for. I had even been considering the idea of going after them legally because I had dedicated quite a few years of my life to the business and they had no right to take that away from me. But then again, they haven't even asked me to quit, and after all, it was my dad's business and he was the boss, so he could do whatever he wanted since nothing had been finalized in writing so far, so I was struggling with what to do. Turns out, I didn't actually have to do anything because karma never lets anything go unchecked for long. A few days ago, my brother ended up making it to the news just 2 months after my parents had started the process of handing over the business to him. But I'm afraid it was not for any good reason. It was because, unsurprisingly, my brother had turned out to be a criminal. I had known it all along, that there was definitely something fishy about him, but my parents had refused to believe it, and now they were going to have to face the consequences. Apparently, the company that he had been employed in previously was just a front for money laundering, and he had a few other charges accompanying that against him, and a couple of other people as well. Their entire group had been caught, and naturally, even though he hadn't been in touch with them for the past 2 months, the others had named him as well, and now, he was in big trouble. This is what I know so far, and ever since I found out, my phone has been flooded by messages from friends and family members about it. And of course, my parents have also been trying desperately to get in touch with me for some reason. For the past 2 months, they hadn't been speaking to me after I left the business, but now, they are blowing up my phone all of a sudden. I had ignored them for a couple of days, but this morning, I decided to call them back and finally speak to them because I was pretty sure that they were going to ask me to come back to them and apologize profusely for disregarding everything that I had told them about my brother already. Unfortunately, my parents, being the people that they are, decided to start off on the wrong foot and started talking to me about my brother and how much trouble he was in. Apparently, the cops were investigating this at the moment, and he is being kept in custody awaiting trial, because of his prior. He kept denying everything and said that he had nothing to do with the money laundering and had in fact lost a lot of money while trying to extricate himself from these people. So I had been right about him being broke, which is why he had been staying with our parents instead of getting his own place. Anyway, instead of apologizing to me, my parents started crying about how terrible all of this was, not just for my brother, but also for the family, and requested that I do something to help them out here. I literally laughed in their faces because they were being so entitled and stupid, and I told them that the only people that I would be helping at this point were the cops because I had been right about everything and they had never bothered to hear me out and wanted to give their son a second chance. Well, they had done what they wanted to do and I was going to do what I wanted to do. They were quite shocked at how I was behaving and started telling me that I was being unfair and that this was my family, so I had to think about our reputation at the very least instead of just going out of my way to make things worse for my brother. They even played the business card and said that that might get investigated because he had been working closely with my parents for the past 2 months and that would not be a good look for them, so for the sake of the family business at least, I had to help them out. But I told them that they had already let me go because it was very obvious that they preferred my brother over me, no matter how he was as a person. Even now, they were choosing to believe his side of the story, his claims that he had not been involved, even though we all know that there is never any smoke without a fire. Plus, we also have his history and nobody in the right mind would believe him apart from our parents. They hadn't even called me to apologize, they were calling me to ask me for help, and the sheer audacity of that is what made me go ham on them. And then, they started calling me selfish and told me that I cared about nothing apart from myself and my enmity with my brother, so much so that I couldn't even see the bigger picture. The phone call ended on a very bad note. So am I the a-hole for telling my parents that I'm not going to be helping them get my brother out of trouble? Update 1. Hey, so I have decided to ignore my parents and do whatever I want to. As it is, I really don't think that they have ever cared about me at any point in their lives. For them, my brother has always been a priority, and it was only for the past couple of years, he was not in touch with them, and they started treating me better. It was only because they thought that they would have nobody to pass on the business to after my dad retired, and maybe that's why they had been treating me better. Whatever the reasons were, it doesn't really matter because now that my brother is finally back, I have noticed the change in their behavior and I remember how we used to be treated differently when we were kids. Nothing has changed and I was a fool for believing otherwise. Even now, they have not apologized to me, and they are trying to make me feel like the bad guy for not wanting to help my brother, a known criminal. I might have even given him the benefit of the doubt if he had been a good person or if he had even bothered to be nice to me in the past couple of months ever since he had returned, but even that has not happened. After he came back, we had the same strained relationship, and we hardly even spoke to each other. So why should I try to help somebody who has absolutely no relationship to me other than just one flimsy family bond? Just because he's related to me by blood doesn't mean I have to stand up for him, especially when I don't agree with him and whatever he does. And anyway, who are my parents to call me selfish for not standing up for him? Isn't that exactly what they had done? They refused to acknowledge all my years of hard work and decided that they were going to pass on the business to my brother, just because he was older than me or whatever. The truth is, it wasn't because he was older than me, it was because he was their darling son. Even if he had been younger than me, they would have found some excuse to let him take over the business. So all these accusations of me being selfish and stuff doesn't really matter to me. They can believe what they want to. I'm gonna do what I want because I have had enough of my family, and I'm honestly very glad that I decided to leave the business because now, since I have thought about it with a clear head, I have decided that I'm going to go ahead and build something of my own. I don't need any of them. I have the capital and I'm sure I have the brains to come up with a decent business model. So, yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. Thank you so much to everybody in the comments who supported me. I think it was really necessary for me to get some clarity, so I stopped doubting myself. Update 2. Hi. So it has been a week and 2 days since I last spoke to my parents, and after that, I blocked them. So they had no way to reach out to me even if they wanted to, and I was quite happy. I had absolutely no idea what was going on with my brother, and neither am I. The cops have not approached me, but I'm sure that when this goes to trial, I might be approached to testify for or against him. When that happens, I will gladly testify against him because I think he deserves to go to jail and face the consequences. This time, our parents cannot just buy his way out because whatever he has done is pretty serious and he has been dodging the consequences of his actions for a really long time. I would be glad, for one, to actually see him pay the price this time. But my parents are obviously still trying to protect him and are going out of their way to do so. Before anybody could approach me, they approached me earlier that day and told me that they wanted to buy me out. So I had been chilling at home for the last few days, and even today, I was at home when they visited. When I saw that it was my parents who were standing outside, I refused to let them in, and I told them to go away because I had nothing to say to them. And I knew that they were definitely not here to apologize, so I had no interest in speaking to them. But of course, they did not leave, they just stood there, and my dad told me that they were here to bargain with me. I was very confused, so he continued and explained that he had realized that trying to get me to be sentimental and ask me to stand up for my family was not going to work because I was not an emotional kind of person. So the only other way he could think of was to offer me money to not testify against my brother when the time came for it. I couldn't believe he was actually trying to influence me and buy me out. I was in shock when he even said that. He then just kept making it worse by saying that he was ready to offer whatever amount I wanted. All I had to do was keep my mouth shut and refuse to testify against him at all. It would mean a great deal to the family because a brother testifying against another brother and trying to send him to jail was not a good look for anyone. He just kept going on, and after I had recovered from the initial shock, I told him that I was not accepting any sort of money from him, and I told him that he needed to go away or I would call the cops on him and he would just end up making things worse for himself and my brother. Then my mother started screaming at me and told me that I was being selfish and that she had never expected me to act this way. She then started saying she didn't think that she and my father had raised me to act like this, pretending as if my family did not matter to me and being so egoistic and self-centered. That's when I really lost my temper and I opened the door to face them because I really wanted to know what they thought they were talking about. As far as I remember, they had raised me to be exactly like this because I had learned all of this from them. They were the ones who had taught me that being egoistic and self-centered was fine because they didn't seem to mind those qualities in my brother, so why was it bad when I was acting that way? He had always been a terrible human being and had taken pride in it, and our parents never seemed to care about it, and even now they were doing the same thing. I then told them that they had been glad to let me go 2 months ago because they did not think that I was important enough to be retained in the company after my brother had come back, but now, just because he was in trouble, they wanted my help. Too bad, that's not how it works. Back then, they didn't remember that I was a part of their family, and this is not how you treat your family members, but now, just because it's convenient for them, they want me to act like we have been one happy family forever. I was so mad that I was actually screaming at them, and both of them looked shocked because I'm really not the kind of guy who loses my temper often. Even when I do, I don't like yelling at people because it just drains me, but I was so mad that I couldn't help it. I just kept yelling at them until my voice got hoarse, and then, I told them that I wanted them to go and never come back because if they did, I would definitely call the cops and make things so much worse for them than it already was. After that, they finally seemed to realize that I was serious and left me alone. I don't know if they are going to come back or not, but if they do, I'm gonna have to call the cops because I don't want to deal with this again. Today was quite emotionally draining for me, and even though I got the closure that I kind of needed, it was not worth it. I don't like getting other people, and I don't like wasting my energy. Update 3, it's happening. My brother's case is going to trial next week. Some time has passed since I last spoke to my parents, but I haven't kept in touch with them after that, naturally. So I hadn't been able to find out exactly what had been going on with my brother, and honestly, I did not care to find out either. All I had been focusing on for the past couple of weeks was building a business model and trying to find investors who would want to get on board. Even without investors, I think I would be able to do well because I had some savings of my own, but I did not want to use them all up. So I have been speaking to one of my uncles and telling him about my plans since I know that he's pretty well off and I would like to get him on board. He was the one who told me about my brother, and it was kind of surprising, but I didn't discuss it with him any further. By now, pretty much the entire family knows that I'm not on speaking terms with my parents anymore, and people have even started picking sides. My uncle, who had been discussing the business model with me and told me about my brother, is obviously on my side, and even though he is my dad's brother, he's not speaking to him anymore because of how I have been treated. I had also told him about the fact that my parents had actually tried to buy me out so that I wouldn't testify against my brother, and he had told his wife about it, was a bit of a loudmouth, so now the entire family knows about that as well. And I have got to say, even the people who are supposedly with my parents, have also been very suspicious about this whole affair, because if my brother is actually innocent, then why would they try to buy me out? That's exactly the kind of thing that somebody who is guilty might try to be doing, so whatever they can cover up whatever they had done. Basically, the entire family has been coming up to me to talk about my parents and my brother and try to get some information out of me, but I've kept my mouth shut so far. I don't want to indulge in gossip and become a hot topic for the family. I'm only going to speak up when it's actually required by the law, and that's going to happen when I have to testify against my brother. I can't see that. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be very emotionally exhausting, but I know that I'm going to do it when the time comes. I haven't been approached yet, but if the trial is going to start soon, I'm sure that I'm going to be approached at some point. And I'm prepared for that. Update 4, hello, guys. So it has been quite a long time since my brother went to trial, and last week, the verdict was announced. He's going to jail. I'm not going to say that I'm happy about it, but this was a long time ago, and I hope my parents have learned their lesson now. I have heard from a bunch of my family members that they have been very upset and have been posting about this, about how unfair his incarceration is because they still think that he's innocent, and all I have to say is that he has pretty much brainwashed them for life. Even though the court has found him guilty, my parents are not ready to believe it. To make matters worse, I know that they have been letting the company suffer because they have been too busy fighting for my brother. A lot of people have quit and they have been facing heavy losses, so I guess they might have to shut down soon. I'm quite relieved that I left, because otherwise, I might have had to be a part of all that. I haven't been in touch with them ever since we had that fight when they tried to buy me out, but I did see them on the date that I was called to testify against my brother. I did testify against him like I said I would, and they were all very visibly upset about it, but did not say anything to me. Which was good, because I wouldn't have appreciated it anyway. Now that my brother is facing the consequences of his actions, and my parents are still refusing to acknowledge the fact that he's not a good person, pretty much the entire family has cut them off, and they have nobody else to blame themselves for this situation. They can keep asking for justice on social media, but the truth is that justice has already been served. But they can't handle that, so they are going to keep living in denial. Good for them, because it hardly matters to me anymore, since I have my own business to attend to. I got funding from my uncle and a couple of his friends, and of course, I put in my own money as well, and 2 months ago, I was able to get my business going. It's going to take a while for us to break, but so far, it's been good. I'm also really proud of myself for being able to accomplish this because having a business of my own had always been my dream. And I'm still young, I have enough time to turn this into an empire and make my childhood ambitions come true. Fingers crossed, I hope I'll be able to achieve everything that I have set out to do.